So most business owners have no idea where their time is actually going. And so today I'm going to show you a tool so you can track exactly where your time is going and what to do once you have that information. So if you've watched a couple of my previous videos, I've been talking a lot about the importance and the value of your time and where you're spending it as a business owner. It's the old cliche of working on your business versus working in your business. And the way that we do that is by looking at high value tasks versus low value tasks. But there's something else besides the value of the task that we need to track as well if we want to properly grow and scale our business. So all you need is a piece of paper or this tool that I'm going to show you today, and you're going to track every single task that you do throughout the day. And next to each task, you're going to mark it with two things. First is the value. That's what we've been talking about a lot, right? A low value task is something that you could hire out for fairly cheap, usually a quarter of your salary, and also just something that doesn't really drive the business forward. For example, checking emails. That for any business owner should be considered a low value task. And then we have high value tasks, which depending on where you're at in business might look different for you, right? But essentially a high value task is something that helps drive the business forward, and typically you're going to be paying a lot more if you were to hire someone to do this task for you. A lot of sales and marketing based tasks would fit into this. And so you're going to go throughout your day and you're going to track every single thing that you do. And I like to do this for a 2-week period. Because as entrepreneurs, our days can be so different. You might not hit every task that you do regularly in a 1-week period. So for me, 2 weeks is kind of that sweet spot. I know that if I'm tracking everything in a 2-week period, that should cover 99% of all the tasks that I do regularly, even semi-regularly. So the other thing that's really important to track outside of the value is the energy. And what I mean by that is, does this give me energy when I do this task, or does this take energy away? Something that I avoid doing, I procrastinate, I dread it, I just feel drained and tired after doing it. That's what we're going to consider a low value task. But if it's something that really drives me, I wake up every morning excited about doing this particular task, that's what we would consider a high value task. So once you fill out this task list with everything you're doing and you give a value to the energy and value of each task, now every task is going to go on a matrix, and it's going to go in one of 4 spots. So I'm going to share my screen so you can get a visual of this, and then we're going to go into the tool that helps you track this and know what to do next. So here is our energy value matrix, which tracks just that, our energy and our value. We've got 4 different quadrants, and depending on what we assigned each task to, it's going to appear in one of these 4 quadrants. So quadrant 1 is low energy, low value. That's the bottom left-hand corner here. If a task gives you low energy, but there's high value to that task, then that's going to go here in this yellow quadrant up here. That's quadrant 2. Quadrant 3 is for low value tasks that give you high energy. And then quadrant 4 is your high value tasks that give you high energy. So that's kind of like a visualization of where each task is going to go. So the problem is, working with most business owners, they have a hard time not only tracking this, but then trying to take each task and put it on a quadrant, whether they write that down on a piece of paper or a whiteboard. It just gets hard to actually track and implement as a busy business owner. And so I've developed a tool that will help you execute this a lot more simply. So here is my time audit spreadsheet. On it, it tracks every 15-minute increment from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. You could always add more if you needed to, or just adjust the times. But a typical work day, I wanted to kind of cover all that. And then down at the bottom, you have a tab for each day. So basically you can go through, delete that part of the video. And then at the bottom, you have a tab for each day. So like I recommended, you could go through 2 weeks and really just track for a 2-week period every task you're doing every day. So I'm going to show you how this works and how it's going to put this on a matrix for us so we don't have to manually do that. So let's start off with Monday. And these are all hypotheticals, of course. This is going to look very different if you're out in the field a lot, or if you've got guys out in the field and you're doing a lot of back-end stuff already. Field is going to be pretty straightforward, so I'll do that next, but let's start by giving some examples. Let's say if you have a lot of techs in the field and you're doing a lot of office work. So let's say we have to check our email in the morning. Let's say we're calling some vendors for pricing. Maybe we got to check our ad. Maybe we're running some ads, and so we're reviewing ad performance. And then we could always drag that down if we did that task for more than 15 minutes. Maybe you spent some time on the phone calling a customer. Let's say you're on the phone for a little bit with them. Let's say you had to call some technicians about some scheduling stuff. Let's take 30 minutes for that. Maybe we're working on a new ad campaign. Maybe you have to make a graphic for that. Maybe we're doing some follow-up, sales. Responding to emails. So you get the picture so far. Now let's go and add the value and energy. And I'm just giving an example here, but I also highly recommend filling it out as you go instead of trying to go back to it, especially with things like energy. There's some things where you're like, oh, was that positive or negative energy? It's a lot easier to determine in the moment versus the next day if you enjoy doing that task or not. So email will always be low value, and for most of us, it's going to be low on energy too. I don't really know very many business owners who started their business to check emails. And so I'm just going to give a couple examples here. Let's say you really like marketing. So we're going to add the plus to that. I like the color code too, so you can kind of visually see how many, red versus green you have on the sheet. Let's say you're into the marketing, so we're going to give that a lot of plus. Let's say low value. Let's say you enjoy calling customers though. And I'm just going to give a couple examples, and let's do just going to give a couple examples here just so you can kind of see how this shows up on the spreadsheet. And just so you don't have to sit here this whole time, let's see this fully filled out for a day. And then I'm going to cut this video until I get this filled out real quick. Actually, this video is going to stay cut for now until I'm just going to test. Okay, cool. Okay, so disregard what I said there about cutting it and filling the whole thing out. Okay, so this gives us a couple examples, right? So now let's go to the matrix and see what this looks like. And so the cool thing here is it automatically puts every task in the quadrant where it needs to go, whether that's the low energy, low value, high energy, low value, low energy, high value, or high energy, high value. So obviously we only filled out a couple things here, but if you did this for a full day and for a full week even, you can see how this would give you a lot of really good info on where you're spending your time. Are you doing things that you don't like doing and are also not good for driving the business forward? How much time are you spending on things that you enjoy doing but aren't necessarily good for the business? Things on the flip side of that, things that are really good for the business but you don't really like doing. And then obviously quadrant 4, where we want to be the most, the things that we really like doing and also drive business forward. That's the sweet spot. And so having this tool really gives you a really good snapshot of where you're at right now, but also most importantly, it gives us a roadmap and a game plan for where we want to be. So what do I mean by that? Let's go back to visual and I'll give you a couple things that we can do to actually put this into action. So let's start with quadrant 1. That's low energy, low value tasks. You need to delegate or stop doing these tasks as soon as possible. These tasks will end up destroying you and your business. We've got to replace your time doing these tasks with tasks in the other 3 quadrants from now. This is going to ensure that your time is spent more doing things that at least you enjoy, but they're also going to be growing the business forward. So that's pretty straightforward. Obviously, red equals bad. We don't want to do low energy, low value tasks. So the nice thing is I'm fairly confident you'll be able to delegate these or outsource them because, like I said at the beginning, we're focusing on tasks that are a quarter of your salary or less, things that are fairly simple to hire out. And if you still have fear around that, just understand that you're replacing your time doing those with higher value tasks that are going to give you a positive ROI on the delegation of those other tasks. And you'll see that a little more clearly as we go through the rest of the quadrants. So quadrant 2, these may be necessary in the early stages of business, or a necessary sacrifice of growing a business depending on how big you're trying to grow. But the idea is we get rid of the quadrant 1 tasks so that if we're doing things we don't like, at least they're valuable to the business, right? If I'm feeling burnout, if I'm feeling stress, and I'm just doing all these things that aren't even driving business forward, you're kind of going to feel like, what's even the point of this? But if you have a long-term vision and goal and you're super passionate about that, on the days where business sucks, where it's tough, you can say, I might not really enjoy doing this right now, but look at what this is going to do for me and look at what this is going to do for the business. That's going to give you the motivation and the discipline you need to keep going. Knowing that you're being productive and having a plan to eventually delegate these tasks can really relieve stress and kind of give you a light at the end of the tunnel. And then we've got quadrant 3. So I want to talk about quadrant 3 for a second because I think society and some of these business gurus tell us to outsource these after quadrant 1 and just hang out in quadrant 2 and 4, no matter if you enjoy doing it or not. And I think a lot of business owners fall into the trap of hiring out these quadrant 3 tasks, the things that you enjoy doing, but might not be super valuable to the business. But what I want to say about that is don't miss out on all the things you love to do just for the sake of productivity. Sure, you might have to delegate some of these tasks based on your skill level and your long-term goals of the business. Let's say you're really bad at marketing, but you enjoy doing it. Yeah, we might want to delegate a couple of those things if we have huge plans for growth, because you're never going to be able to achieve that. But I really believe that it's okay to do some of these high energy, low value tasks as long as they're balanced with quadrant 4 tasks. Which brings us to our final quadrant. Quadrant 4, high value, high energy. This is the best place to spend your time. Never stop doing these quadrant 4 tasks. It most likely aligns with your vision of why you started your business in the first place. This is really the sweet spot. And so the cool thing about this is as your business grows, all we're doing is getting rid of the quadrant 1 tasks. And as you grow, your business grows, your revenue grows, and then your salary grows. What used to be a quarter of your salary is now a lot less. And you have new tasks that used to be in quadrant 2 because it's like, hey, I don't like doing this, but I can't really afford to delegate this right now. Well, when I double my business, some of those tasks are now going to drop into quadrant 1. Easiest example is, let's say you do not enjoy the actual work, being a technician for whatever your business is. But when you first get started, you might have to do that work. And maybe you can hire out, the receptionist responsibilities, but you need to be out in the field. But after your business grows, you might see, okay, now it's time. Now I can actually afford to hire someone to do the actual field work. And I can be in the background in the office doing the sales, doing the marketing, doing all those other things. And so this matrix is constantly changing as your business continues to grow. And also you might learn to love some things, especially as you get good at it. Mark Cuban has a really interesting take on this, that we tend to enjoy doing things that we're good at. And typically when we first start a business, we're not very good at a lot of the things it takes to run a business. But as you keep practicing, you might get better. And what used to be low energy tasks could eventually flip to a high energy task for you. And so I recommend going through this exercise at least twice a year, if not quarterly. It really just kind of depends on how fast and how quickly your business is growing and those changes are happening. But for sure, every time before you hire for a new position, I always do this time audit because it helps me get clear on which tasks I need to delegate and outsource. And usually all those quadrant 1 tasks I can put into a job description and bring someone in to handle those for me. So if you're a business owner that's looking to grow, this spreadsheet is really going to be a game changer for you. And I typically reserve stuff like this for my clients only, but I actually want you to have it for free just because I know how important it is as a business owner to track your time and actually make changes and implementations based off your findings. So I'm going to link this below so that you can have access to it, so you can use this to implement, figure out what you need to outsource and delegate in your business, and ultimately grow the business and spend that time doing the things that drive the business forward, but more importantly, the things that you enjoy doing too. Because that's why we started a business, right? Because we have a passion, we have a vision, and we don't want to lose sight of that. And this matrix really helps you stay in control of that. I really hope this helps. If you found this valuable, please share with a friend that's a business owner as well. I want as many people as possible to have access to this tool, and we'll catch you next time.